Hello everyone! Today I decided, even though I'm sick and I'm frustrated, I wanted to make a top. So I have made this fabulous top. It is the McCalls 6896 and I have done B but all one colour. I got this pattern from Spotlight a while ago. I have made several of these tops. This one I've decided to do sleeveless, so it comes with a facing. If I do this, you can see the facing is a nude colour. I did that because I got this out of a remnant piece of fabric from Spotlight. So if you'd like to see how to make this with an invisible zip, please stay tuned. Alright, so we're going to start with our centre front piece. And I've chosen, obviously, not to do the split. And then I'm going to take my side front piece, and you want the curves. So basically when you sit them right sides together, the curve's going to join. And then we're going to flip it over and then do this curve. Now, if you're a new beginner sewer, you might want to pin this, but over time you will learn to do it without pins, which is what I'm about to do. So the way I do it without pins is I hold this one up and then just kind of use my finger as pins and line it up as I go. So this on the outside is going to look a little bit roughly. It's not going to sit perfectly straight, but that's okay. So I'm just going to continue bringing this round so that the edges meet up, which is exactly what you do with pins, just without the part where I have to pin it. Now I've done the hard curve, I'm going to come and join this bottom edge, and then everything, if you've done it correctly, will all just line up for you. Now obviously if you're super new to sewing, use some pins. You might be disheartened if it doesn't work for you the first time, because once you use pins you'll get a feel for how it goes together. See? And so then, you can't really see it, but it's sitting lovely. There's no pinches or anything, it's just a nice neat curve. So now I'm going to do the same with the other side, but I always sew with the bulk out. So we're actually now going to do it opposite. So I'm going to join this up here. Sewing patterns have a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is 1.5 centimeters in metric, which is I'm pretty sure why they do that. So I'm just going to do the first bit. I tend to do 1/2 inch. I know that's not correct, but I don't know. Works for me. You can go just over the 1/2 inch line, that'll do the same thing. So again, joining these curves, then come down to the bottom and join this. Now this was actually a remnant piece, so I'm getting a whole top out of like a 1 meter remnant from Spotlight. So this top costs me $4 for the fabric and a zip. And then we're going to back stitch and then trim. And then you want to check. So I always check to make sure that nothing has pinched in the seam, because if it has, you want to fix it now rather than later, because we will have to overlock soon. And because it was only 1 meter, I've actually just used some nude colored fabric I had for the lining, or like the facing at the front, because you're not going to see it anyway. That's how I get around that problem. So now we're going to grab I'm going to put that aside. We're going to grab our back, which kind of looks like the front, but is split in half. And then our side back. And we're just going to do the same thing. And then we're going to join them all together. You could also, if you wanted to, just continue on that main front piece and just keep adding around and around. I personally prefer to do it this way. But again, you don't have to. And I always keep all my pattern pieces joined to them until I'm up to sewing them. Even though I can tell that that's the back, the side back and the side front do look quite similar. So it's just nice to keep them together. So the way to tell which one's right is have the curve together, and then we're just going to flip that over and start here. like this. We're going to back stitch at the start because we always back stitch. And then I'm just going to maneuver this around. Open them out flat. Now this curve won't be as deep as the front one because the front one is obviously for our breasts and the back, we don't have them. Alright, so I've got over the main curve. Now I'm going to come down to the end and make sure that they join up because it is quite easy to stretch things so that they don't fit, which is obviously not what we want to do. Lining everything up. Now I'm using cotton sateen, and I'm making a size 10, but cotton sateen is a little forgiving. It has got some stretch in it, so this should be a really comfortable top. Alright, check it. It looks good. I also like the style of this pattern, because it doesn't, the flare at the bottom isn't like a separate added piece, so that you've got the flow of your print the whole way down. I actually quite like that. I've made several of these tops and I plan on making several more. This is going to be one of my main winter tops. I'm going to make them with the 3/4 sleeves and wear them all winter. That is my plan. Okay, now if you wanted to as well, you can sew from the bottom to the top. I'll do that now. It's not a huge deal. Usually I do top to bottom because I don't know, I like that flow. And on the off chance that I've stuffed something up somewhere, I could just cut it off the bottom and it's less dramatic. Just line that top bit up there, and then we're going to put the curve in, making sure that our bottom piece of fabric is always going to the 1/2 inch line, or just over it in actual fact, and backstitch. Then we lay that out. And that looks lovely as well. So now we can go back and grab our front and open it out. And then we're just going to join the sides together. So like this. So this dip here is actually your armhole. So we're just doing the armhole section now. So we're going to stitch and back stitch. Always backstitch. And you'll notice that nothing's crossing over, so I haven't had to stop and use the overlocker yet. Although after these joinings I will be. So I'm just going down, backstitching at the end, trim off the tails. Although the overlocker will most likely get most of the ones left over anyway. And so then I grab my other side and back piece and join it to the opposite side. And again, as you can tell, I like going top to bottom, so I've just flipped it over so they're going to sit in the opposite pattern for the opposite side. Join the bottom. Pull it together and off we go. Back stitch, pull it out. So now we just have one big wraparound that looks like this. So before I go any further, I'm going to go and overlock all of those seams and both sides of the back, because that's where our zip's going to go, and I always like to overlock it before I put the zip in. So I'm going to overlock both the raw edges there on the long lines and then all of those pieces. So I'll be right back. Right, so I also decided to overlock that bottom curve because now when I'm ready I can just turn it up and stitch it, which is going to make it a little bit quicker. So I've overlocked here, so now we're going to put the zip in. So I probably should have done this off camera, but what I need to do is change to my invisible zipper foot because I am using an invisible zipper. Now you can use a normal zipper, that's not a problem. I don't have one in this colour and length and stuff. So this is what an invisible zipper foot looks like. It's kind of got like these two channels on each side, and what it does is it sits each side of the teeth so that it can stitch really, really close. And I use a bobbin as my screwdriver because I've always got one handy. Alright, so I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to unzip. I'm going to hold the zip how I want it to sit on the garment. So I've got this right side up and the zipper right side's up, and I'm going to unzip it and then take the closest side and flip that inwards, right sides over like that, and that's how I'm going to stitch it down. So I'm just going to start and put my foot down. I'm going to start where the teeth start and not at the end of the zip, because sometimes it struggles to get over it, and I'm going to start with a back stitch. Once I turn my machine on, like that. And see, just there, it got a little bit stuck trying to get back on the teeth. That is something I have noticed, which is why I always tend to start on the teeth. So now I'm just going to hold these together with the raw edges together. And this is why we overlock first. And I'm just going to go down like this. I don't have to go too slowly because this foot is holding the teeth in place, so I'm not worried. You can get a version of these for domestic machines as well. I'm not sure if I've got one. If I do have one, I'll make another one of these with sleeves on the domestic machine. I've nearly worked out how I'm going to rearrange my room to be able to do domestic videos, so just please bear with me on that. Alright, and then I'm going to get to here. So my zip doesn't go all the way down. It's got about 13 centimeters or just under 5 inches at the bottom. But that will be enough to get in and out, and that's all I was really concerned about. It doesn't have to go all the way to the bottom. So that is now, you always want to check your zip. So you're then going to zip it up, and you can see that there's no issues. It didn't get stuck anywhere. These are all very important things to check. So I'm going to grab the other side. And I'm just going to sit it. So I'm going to go around and pretend that it's joined. And then I'm going to hold it and unzip it again. Now this is always the way that I do zippers, just to make sure that I don't get a twist. Because there's nothing worse than sewing the perfect zipper and then realize you twisted it when sewing, so you have to unpick it all. So I'm going to hold it like this, and then I'm going to flip it over that way. And then with this zipper foot, I can just put it all on the other side, and that way I can still start from the top. So I'm going to start there at the zipper teeth, not the edge of the zipper. And I can come back and stitch that bit later if I'm worried. And then off we go. You always want to stop with your needle down. I actually think the pattern says not to join this yet, to put the zipper in first and then continue joining it. That would make sense, but too late now. This is still going to work just fine. Just means I've got more bulk of fabric. To be fair, I haven't made this pattern in a while. It's been over a year. I might still have to check the pattern yet. I'm not sure. We'll see. Alright, so we're going to get to the zipper. We're going to back stitch. Then we can pull that out, trim off the tails. And then also, if you want to, you can go the other way. So to sew off the zipper, I can just start here, stitch, back stitch, and go off the end towards the top. That top bit, where there is no actual zipper, will be the seam allowance when I put the facing on. So the zip will then still sit at the top of the garment, so we don't have to stress about that. That's why we put it on now and not later. Okay, trim off all the tails. Don't throw them on the floor like I just did. Put them in the bin. All right, and then again, we're going to zip it up to make sure it works and that you haven't done any twists. I'm pretty sure I did fine, but you just never know. So I'm going to hold it and we're going to zip it and we're going to make sure that it is both invisible, even, and not twisted. So you can't actually see the zipper teeth. See? There's the seam there. That's actually where the zipper is. But because I use the invisible zipper foot, it got close enough that it can't be seen. And the other thing I like about this pattern is because there's no horizontal seam, your zip won't get stuck there. I quite often find with invisible zips, if there's a seam the other way, the bulk makes it almost impossible to stitch past. So that's another reason why I like this pattern. Alright, so now that that's done, I can take off this foot, because that's all I needed it for. It's not really any good for anything else. And I'm going to put back in, I'm using a skinny foot this week. It's actually been on my machine since last week, since I haven't sewn for most of this week. But I don't know, I'm enjoying the skinny foot. And I'm screwing that the wrong way. You'd be surprised at how often I screw it the wrong way. This needs more screwing on because this foot is thinner at the top than the other one. Not that that's a problem. It just means more screwing. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to come to where the end of the zip is, and I'm just going to sew that up. So how I do it, and this may not be the right way, but this is how I do it. I'm going to line up the bottom, because we want everything to be lined up. So I'm going to line up the bottom, and I'm going to stitch, and I'm going to back stitch. And then I'm going to have this all nice and flat, and I'm going to pull this part of the zipper that we didn't stitch out as like a tab to hold on to. And then I can see where I'm trying to stitch up to. By having it out, we're just trying to stitch to the bottom of the zip where the other stitches are, like that, and then back stitch. And then if all goes to plan, it should sit lovely on the other side. And it does not. Right, so I'm going to unpick that and redo it. See? I can see it. You probably can't. Just here. So here's my beautiful thing, and then it kind of goes whoop, and then onto the other one. So I am going to unpull that and fix it, because I don't like it like that. And that's such a minor detail. If you're new to sewing, you could probably leave it. Nobody's going to see it on my top. Nobody would notice it except me. But I know it's there, so it's coming out. So I don't use a quick unpick. If you're new to my channel, I do not use a quick unpick. I hate them. I refuse. I find that they tend to just mess everything up. Alright. So I haven't unpicked all of it because this end was fine. I've just unpicked like that much. And so now I'm going to flick it the other way, and I'm going to stitch from the zipper down, because obviously the other way didn't work out the way I wanted. So I want to go to where the stitches are, which is there, like that, and we're going to stitch, and we're going to back stitch, and then we're just going to come down and meet our other stitches we already did, and that should be neater. Oh, look at that. Look at that, that's perfect. You can't see where the zipper ends and my stitches start. Awesome. Right, I'm happy with that. We're going to leave it, because you can't tell. That always makes me happy when you can't tell. So, only a couple of things to go. Now that the bottom has been done, I'm actually just going to finish the bottom so that I don't have to think about it later. So I'm just going to fold up the hem about 3/8 of an inch. You can do more. You can have a bigger hem or a smaller hem. Oh, actually I might do 1/2 an inch, because then I can guide it along here. So we're going to stitch and back stitch. Now you've got to remember this is a curve, so this isn't going to be as simple as you might think, but I've had a lot of practice in doing hems like this. So if you're new to hemming, grab an iron and iron this down. Because that's what I used to do until my eyes got used to eyeballing a 1/2 inch. I can't eyeball all things. I can eyeball 1 inch when ironing and 1/2 inch when hemming. Ugh, I just broke my thread. So today I am using Rasant thread, which I have not yet mentioned. And then sometimes, lately, specifically today, my thread keeps breaking. I was making some other things for my wholesale order before this. And every, 4 minutes the thread would break, which is super frustrating. But it could be a lot of things. It's not necessarily the thread. It could be something's too tight. It could be there's a little like nick somewhere in some metal that's making it break. I'm going to investigate it later today and figure it out. And you always want to stop with the needle down and then readjust your fabric. And because we overlocked, these will be down in one direction. So you want to make sure that you're tucking them under in the correct direction when you're doing this final stitching here. See, it just did it again. Hasn't done it the whole project, and now apparently it's having a meltdown. So this also could be, I am getting close to the end of the thread spool. So it also could be that there was faults in the start of the thread. It could be a lot of things. I'm just going to suck it up and deal with it till later. See, just did it again. It also could be that I'm getting a little kind of nick down here. So I'm going to have to get a rat's tail file and do some filing in there. But I'd really like to finish this project first before I go poking around in hubby's shed. Oh my god, now I can't thread the needle. This is not my normal light. The normal light that I use for sewing is actually too bright for the camera. It distorts the image. So it's this one here. So it's a little bit harder to see threading needles. Maybe if I slow down it'll be better. Although we all know how I hate sewing slowly. I'm also going to trim off these tails. I will have to go back and do all of them eventually, but I'm heading towards those ones. So again, tuck it. I'm using my hands. I'm spreading my hands out like this, to pretend that they're pins. That's a thick part, and then we're going to stop with the needle down, and then again I'm going to readjust and use my fingers as pins. Oh no, see, did it again. It's like when I stop it doesn't like me. First day back sewing and it's being naughty. Not really how I envisioned my day. So again, in this particular instance, pins would probably be quite handy. I wouldn't have to keep stopping, since stopping seems to be its main issue. But I stopped then and it was fine. And back stitch when we get back to the start. Now I have to go back and trim all those tails where it decided to start and stop. There's one. There's one. And that kind of looks like it could be all of them. Is that one? Yes, that is one. There we go. So now the bottom's hemmed. I know we haven't really done the top, but that's okay. The bottom looks lovely, so now we can just finish off the top. So I'm going to turn it inside out. And we're now going to stitch our shoulder seams. Like that. And then I'm going to grab the other one here, like this. And again, use pins if you want to. And then I'm just going to bring this over and chain stitch them together. From there, line it up, across we go. Voila. And so now it's literally just an inside out top. So all we have to do is this top neck facing. So this is my facing. So this one is the neck, like this. And then these two are the back. So what we want to do, make sure I've got right sides up, which I do not. Right. And then we're going to take this bit and this bit. No, that's the other side as well. Okay then. There we go. So I'm going to join it here. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. So I'm just going to come around and chain stitch that in. So there, there. You might be wondering why I haven't gone to overlock yet. And the answer is because I need to overlock. What have I just done? I've just sewn them the wrong way. Of course I have. I don't think I'm as better as I think I am. That's fine. So if you just clip every third or fourth stitch, it will just pull apart, which I think is really cool. Okay, right side up. Right side up. Flip together. There we go. Let's try that. Should work better. Trim off your tails. Okay, that's better. So this is now what we've got. So I am going to go and I'm going to overlock those bits, my shoulder seams, and the entire bottom edge of this. So I don't have to roll hem it. If you don't have an overlocker, you will just have to roll hem it. Right, I lied. Don't stitch the top section together because that you only do that if you're putting in sleeves. I'm not putting in sleeves, therefore I need this open at the top of the shoulders. So I'm gonna unzip the zip a little bit. I've also unpicked the shoulders off camera. I knew there was a reason I didn't do it before. I just clearly forgot. So I have also overlocked the edge of this to make it machine washable, and now I don't have to worry. So what I want to do is, this is my neck seam. So I'm going to flip it so that right sides are together, and I might actually use pins for this because it's not just a continuous flow. We have to stop and start. So I'm going to put some pins in. First, lining up the two edges. Because this is sateen, it may or may not stretch a little bit when I'm trying to do this. So, pins are super handy to prevent that. So, ow. Try not to stab yourself with them. Also, when I put pins in, I make sure that the ball of the pin is not all the way in. So they're all going to stick out a little bit. This is for a couple of reasons. One, they're easy to grab out while you're sewing. And two, they're not going to get stuck under your foot if you get too close to them. And if you're like me and you stitch over them, then that's just one more reason. So, now I'm going to do, so this is the armhole that I'm doing now. So we're just going to pin everything down. And this seam needs to line up with the seam under your arm. So I'm going to make sure that that matches as well. They build patterns so that everything matches. And I'm just going to fold that down and pin that seam allowance down. And I want one more in here, maybe even two. Need to pin that down. Like that. Okay, so that is the armhole, the neck hole. Now we need to come and do the other armhole. So I'm going to start with that middle seam. Pin that together there. Then I can do the top edge seam here. And then pin that down towards the armhole. Like that. And then this side, I'm going to pin here. And then that down towards the armhole. And then like one more there. So we now have not done the shoulder seams. So we haven't pinned them, but we need to stitch everywhere I've just put pins. So we're going to stitch the armhole, the neck here, and then the other armhole. And you want to start, no, actually, do I want to start down? No, I'm just going to start there. I'm just going to start there, it's fine. So off we go, making sure we're doing our seam allowance. And if you put your pins in the way that I have, you can run over them if you want to. Now I know it freaks a lot of people out to do it, but I like to run them over personally. If I've got time to pull it out, I will, like I just did there. But if I'm on like a sewing, if I'm on a roll, I will just leave them in and sew over them and pull them out at the end. So it is your personal preference. I also don't sew at full speed. I don't have my foot flat to the floor when I'm sewing over pins. Always make sure we're back stitching as well. And so now our armholes are lined with a nude. You could also do it in the fabric if you've got enough. I ran out. Hence the nude, which funnily enough was actually an old sheet that I had. There's a flat sheet. I don't know why I buy sheet sets, because hubby doesn't like a flat sheet. So I tend to just end up cutting them up anyway. And back stitch. Cool. So now, this is what we've got going on. And I've already overlocked that other edge. So we're good. So I am going to go and overlock those bits that we just did to make sure that it's going to stay lovely. I also need to do, before I go, I need to do over the zipper at that back edge there. This is also going to bring it so that the top of the zipper is now at the top of the top. and it's just said the word top a lot. Turn that back inside out because I am going to need to do that. And then we're going to grab this other one, right sides together, along the top edge with the correct seam allowance, and it should all work out because that's how they build the zippers. Like that. Awesome. I just need to make sure I'm doing this right. I should have really checked the instructions. Pull all of these out. Alright. So then, right sides together, like that. And because I've stitched them, you can do all this fancy stuff, and I never do it. So I have done it correctly for the way I plan on making this. I am just going to stitch straight across there. You will see the seam here, but you're never going to actually see it. The way they want you to do it is you're supposed to leave like 1/2 inch and then sew all the individual bits together and then hand stitch the last bit. I hate hand stitching. So I'm going to go and overlock this, and then we'll come back and I'm going to do the shoulders my way. So I've overlocked, and then we've got like this hole where the shoulder is. So I'm going to turn it all right sides out. And then before I actually stitch the shoulders together, I'm going to understitch this so it sits the way I want it to. So the way we understitch is, we're going to have the seam allowance on the side of the facing, which is really easy to see because I'm doing the opposite side. So I want it on the nude side, and I'm just going to stitch really close to the seam. But I'm going to stitch that seam allowance underneath to the side of the facing. What this is going to do is it's going to make it easier to iron because this is going to sit where you're telling it to sit. And then you'll see the stitches on the back but not on the front. So I've just done this little bit. So see the stitches here? Then when I turn this, this is now the top, of the top. So this is like the zipper, there's the back bit. So there's stitching on the inside, but you don't have to have the stitching on the outside, which I just think looks awesome. Lucky I didn't just snap that needle or rip a giant hole. Yeah, man. Alright, so I'm going to do that understitching. So that's what they mean when they say understitch in a pattern. I don't think their pictures are very clear. You kind of need someone to show you, in my opinion. So now I'm just going to go and I'm going to understitch everything because it sits nicer and there's less ironing. And then you won't have your facing kind of trying to pop out, which if you skip this, it will happen. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to understitch. And I just do it little bits at a time. I can't really pin this. You'll just get stabbed with pins. So just move along slowly and do it in like very small sections. Always stopping with your needle down so that you don't lose your place. And you want to stitch pretty close. So I usually stitch, I don't know, about 1/4 inch from the seam. Alright, back stitch. I'm just going to move straight to the next one. I know this looks really messy, but so this is one of the shoulder bits. So you just run off the edge, start on the next one. Making sure that, oops, and I just snapped the needle. Apparently didn't want to do that. Okay then. Not snap the needle, snap the thread. I did actually buy a new roll of white. I possibly should have pulled it out to do this. And I'll just turn the rest of this into bobbins. I actually went and bought a bunch of stuff. I've decided that I'm going to be doing a lot more clothing until I get all of the fabric that I bought for clothing done. Because it's starting to grow out of control. So I need to make the items. I haven't just bought fabric for fun. Like, I have a plan for it all. I just need to do it. And half the reason I haven't yet done it is because I have to trace out the pattern because I'm trying to make everything different. I own so many patterns, it's really just time I use them. Last little bit there, back stitch. And then I'm going to pull it out. Trim the tails. And so now I've just got, I'm about halfway. I just did the neck. So when you hold it, obviously I have to iron it. But you can see it's staying down. Basically you're stitching it down without having to have the top stitching. Because sometimes you just don't want to see the top stitching. So understitching probably takes the longest because you got to get it to sit correctly. But please take the time to do it because I do promise that it is worth it because I hate ironing. And even though I have to iron sateen, by understitching, I only have to iron like half. Like it takes half as long. So I'm doing the other armhole now. The armhole's obviously a bit more free and open and quicker, which is nice. And if you can't get all the way into the armhole, don't stress too much. Just do the best that you can. And back stitch. Then I just have to trim that one there. Turn it back out. Right, understitched. Does still need an iron. I will do that, but not right now. Right, back to front. So we need to now join our armholes. So we're going to go from here, and I'm going to match up. Oh, this is a brilliant idea. I did it in different colors. So I want to match up this seam with that seam. And I'm going to pin this because I want it to stay matched like that. You can, now, okay, the quickest way to do this is to just sew straight over and bob your uncle, you're done. But what you can do if you want to is sew around. So that's what we're going to do. Although the other way is quicker. I suppose I should show you the proper way. So I'm just going to pin the outer piece because I care less about what the seam looks like on the lining. We're not going to see the lining anyway. So I'm just going to stitch around. And what you can actually do is keep bringing it around and stitch half of your lining as well. So pretend it's like a circle. Your circle's going to get smaller and smaller and tighter, so you won't be able to do all of it, but you can get most of it. Like that. So this is what it looks like. I have stitched around, so when I pull this out, I've now got the outside looking lovely, and I've just got this little tiny hole in here. So the way I combat this, now this is not the way the pattern says to do it, so you don't have to do it this way. But how I do it is, turn the whole thing in the right way is going to help my cause to begin with. So I've just got this gap in it. So what I can do is I can tuck, if you pull on it, it kind of tucks itself in. Right, so I've just got that little gap, and then from the top, I'm going to stitch in the ditch. And what that will do is that will seal up that last little bit. And you may or may not need to put a pin in it. And then just stitch in the ditch, so you won't see the stitches, but it will stitch it shut without having to hand stitch, because I hate hand stitching. You also could just hand stitch it. But again, I don't want to. I also would love it if this thread would stop misbehaving. I'm very close to going to getting the new spool. Okay, that's it. I'm getting the new spool of thread. Alright, I changed my thread. Turns out I have a nick in my machine. So I am going to go after this and get a small rat's tail file and file where the thread goes in. This is actually the second time this has happened to this machine. It happened a few years ago as well. So the thickness of my thread just kind of slowly wears away at the metal. It's also happened to my embroidery machine with the rayon thread. Apparently it's just something that happens to me in my life because I use my machine so much. It's fine. So I'm just going to stitch slowly. I'm doing the second one now, and then I will most likely hand stitch the hole shut just to show you the difference. But you still do, so you just keep bringing it around, because you want to try and stitch as much of it shut by machine as possible so that there is, in fact, less hand stitching, because I hate hand stitching. And you can usually get this hole fairly small. And my thread went again. But we are nearly finished. I've got a few other little bits to do, and then the machine's done, and, well, the top's done, and then I'll go fix the machine. Okay, so that's probably enough. So then when you just pull, you pull this out, you then just get this very small kind of gap here. So you can just tuck it under and stitch it down. So I'm just going to tuck it in like so, and then it's just that gap there. So if you want to, you can put some pins like that. And then you just need a hand stitching needle, which I have one in here. I always leave a, whoops, I just pulled it out, but I always leave a very small amount of thread on my needles when I put them in my pin cushion, mainly just so I can see it and grab it easier. So I always double my thread just because it's stronger and I don't want things to break. And yes, I did just pull it through the machine. I could have grabbed the other one, but it's fine. So I'm just going to start at the join, and I'm going to do, I believe it's called whip stitch. So I'm just going to come and show you. Oops. So I'm just going to go over and under right near the join. Pull, over and under. Now, you will see it, but it is quicker than trying to do an invisible one, and it's on the underside of the shoulder, so nobody's actually going to see it unless it's not on you. But even then, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just doing little stitches fairly close together, but not so insanely close that this is going to take me forever. And I will quite often use my fake nail to push the needle through, just so it doesn't hurt my finger at all. You could also get a thimble, but I feel like fake nails are pretty much doing the same thing anyway. So we're just going to continue sewing that along and then tie it off. Alrighty, to tie this off, what we're going to do is I'm going to stab it in and out of the fabric like I was for the whip stitching, like that. And then I'm going to put my finger on the needle I'm going to hold the thread and I'm going to wrap it 6 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So your fingers are holding the twists on there. 5 isn't quite as strong, and 7 tends to get the knot in the wrong spot. So now I'm going to hold the threads at the fabric. So you're using your finger to hold them down there, and I'm just going to pull this through, pull it tight, and it creates, you then just kind of go back and forth, or you can go round and round, or whatever works for you, and it creates a knot right at the base, like that. And then you can just trim off your excess. And that is secure and done. So the other things we need to do, technically the top's done, but so this doesn't happen and this pops out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack it down. Now you can do this by hand or by machine. I'm going to attempt by machine, but if it keeps misbehaving, I will have to do it by hand. But the idea is we just want to tack, so at any seam that you can see, I'm going to pull this down so it's sitting perfectly nice the way we want it to, like this. Oh, stop getting caught. And then, so I'm going to have this down on here, and then I'm going to pinch where this long seam and the facing seam intersect, and I'm going to pull it, and I'm just going to stitch those 2 bits together. So I'm not stitching, and you just go back and forth a couple of times like that, and it's done. So I didn't stitch the actual top, I'm just stitching the excess where, so there's the stitch line, there's my overlocking, and I kind of stitched in between there to hold that down. And so you just want to do that at any intersecting seam that you can find. So here's another one here, so I'm going to get it to sit nice and flush, pull it all so it's smooth, pinch it, and then kind of push the actual garment out of the way so we can just do it on that seam allowance. And you don't have to do a lot of stitches. I'm just back and forthing like 3 or 4, and it's a tack down, right? And so now, see how that sits in the arm? It's not trying to pop out. Well, it is a little bit, but that's because I've got another one to do. So, again, you want to make sure that it's sitting nice and flush to begin with. Then I'm going to intersect these, pinch it and hold it, pull the garment out of the way, pop it under, and then I'm just going to stitch back and forth. So you can do this by hand. It wouldn't hurt to do it either way. Apparently I'm having success with my machine. So see how now from this side, it's kind of tacked down. So it's not going to flop around. It's not going to pop out. So that's one side. I'll do the other side off camera. The other thing we need to do is where the zip is. So you might want to zip your zip all the way up so that you can best see this. So see here how it's just kind of hanging out. What we want to do is we want to attach it down. Pardon me. But we also want to tuck in this edge. Oh, I just inhaled dust. Hold on. I feel it tickling my throat. And coughing wasn't getting it out. So, what we want to do with this zip, and this is possibly the trickiest bit to understand. This is as if the zip is open. So first off, we need to tuck under that so it sits like that. And then we're going to fold it over onto itself like this. And then I'm just going to stitch it to the zipper. So I'll do that again. Here's your zip here. And so we've stitched it all the way across. So we want to tuck under that edge so that it's making the zip sit flat. Then we're going to tuck it over so that the understitching is sitting under like this. And then you're going to stitch it just down the bottom where they kind of intersect at the start, but only to the zip. And what that does is hold it down. See? One side's sitting down and lovely, and the other side is still floppy. So I have to do that to the other side. You can stitch the whole way if you really want to. I don't find it necessary. You can also turn it inside out and stitch it so you don't see the stitches. But again, I don't see it's necessary. I might stitch a little bit more on this, but you just want to be really careful that nothing else is underneath, because you don't want to start stitching your garment all weird. And that's where it all starts getting tricky. So that's why I only do that little bit. Just do that a little bit more. So the other way to do that is if you don't just want to tack it like that, if you want to stitch the whole way down and not see the stitches, here's the way you do it. So I'm going to unzip it to get to it easier. I'm also going to make sure I do it in the view of the camera, unlike my tassels. So then what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over like this. And you can just stitch all the way up on the edge of the zip like this, and then turn it out like that. That also works. So it's tucked under, it's stitched down, it's lovely from this side. All in all, quite lovely. So I'm just going to finish off those rest of them, the rest of the tacking, because I've only done one side, and then it will be all finished. So I'll show you that in a sec. All right, so I have given it a final iron. So this is now sitting flat and lovely. All of my facings are now in and flat and flush, and your top is all done. Make sure you take a pair of snips with you when you go to the iron to snip off any extra threads that you find as you're ironing, because it does happen. I found one, so I missed one tail somewhere, which isn't too bad. But yeah, a super cute summery top. But if I put a nice jacket over this, this will also be lovely in winter. All right, guys, until next time, bye-bye.